Now, despite the general recognition of the existence of peer pressure, it is still a phenomenon that is not well understood. Young people are confronted with peer pressure well before middle school and well after. But during the middle school years, peer pressure becomes particularly noticeable. At this time, adolescents undergo biopsychosocial changes, and these changes commit the young people to the serious tasks of becoming autonomous individuals. Now, during middle school years, adolescents accelerate their developing independence from the family, and as they do, they begin to cover up into distinct groups. The adolescents need to become a peer group gives the group both influence and power. Well, having said that, joining me on this conversation today, I have the honor of inviting my guest. First of all, we have Nwali Desmond, who will be joining us subsequently in the course of this show. He is a business consultant and political strategist from Nigeria. Also with us right now, we have from the United Kingdom, Esther apologies for Esther, I'm always having issues pronouncing your surname. Let me give it another try. Airemionkhale, if I'm correct. All right, Esther is currently in the United Kingdom. She's an educationist. Thank you so much, Esther, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to always have you join us. We also have Nwosu joining us another time on this show, a content strategist in Nigeria. Thank you, Nancy, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You both look dashing, by the way, I must confess.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. All right,
let's
go.
It's just us ladies right now.
Yeah, it's just us ladies, yeah. Hopefully we have Desmond join us subsequently, and if not, well, we'll see how that goes. Now, let's go straight into the discussion. We're talking about peer pressure, the influence and the difference between positive and negative peer pressure, if there's anything like that. So I'm going to start with you, Esther. What exactly comes to mind when you hear the word peer pressure?
So I think what comes to mind is influence, really. And yes, there is positive and there is negative peer pressure, because pressure is influence, right? And then when we think of peer pressure, we're thinking of the people around us that influence us. And there is no way, because we're social beings, there is no way we would not be influenced by different people. So when I think of peer pressure, I just think influence. So the question is, who is influencing me?
Okay, I mean, that's very short and very, very precise. Thank you so much. Nancy, I would also like to ask, among what age bracket do you think peer pressure is most rampant? I know that in my introduction, I talked about the adolescent stage, I talked about the youth and all that, but among what age bracket would we say that we have the most peer pressure?
I would say that happens mostly at the age of self-discovery. So if you're discovering yourself at 18, that's when it's going to happen to you. If you're discovering yourself at 28, at 38, the age of self-discovery. Why? Because that is the age where you are beginning to draw lines in sand about who you want to be. There are people you are looking at. You've seen their results from the fields they've chosen in life, and you're beginning to feel like, okay, I think this person mirrors me. I think this is where I want to go. I think this person equally has the kind of strength and maybe weaknesses that I have. So whenever you get to the age of self-discovery, that is when it happens. Some people get there at 16, some people get there at 38. But whatever age you get, at whatever age you understand self-discovery and you begin to intentionally seek to discover self, I believe that is when that happens.
Okay, but Nancy, would we now say that for people who have fully discovered themselves, and if that is even possible to completely discover yourself as a human in the course of your life, would we say that for people who have fully discovered themselves, they cannot be influenced by peer pressure at all?
So the thing is, when you say peer pressure, it begins to sound like it's all negative. No, there is positive peer pressure, there is negative peer pressure. So, and there is nothing like full discovery of self. Man is always evolving. Last year we had iPhone 12. This year we have 13. Now we have 15 Pro Max, right? There is always something new. There is always a discovery to be made. There will always be something new. So for each stage you want to get to, there is a pressure, a good pressure from someone who has done what you want to do. There is a good pressure from someone who is driving you to achieve that set goal. There is a good pressure from a team, someone somewhere that doesn't even know you exist, that you're following online, that, puts you in that right frame of mind that makes you think, oh, whatever it is I'm setting out to do is possible. So the full discovery, I don't think there's anything like that. Man is on a journey of discovery until he dies. He is still in search of different things to discover.
Well, that being said, I think that it's safe to say that anybody at whatever age bracket is susceptible to peer pressure, whether negative or positive. And we're going to come to that eventually, the negative and positive side of peer pressure. But right now, let's take a look at what the youth across Africa are saying about peer pressure and what they think.
Peer pressure can help bring out the best in you, urging you to be the very best version of yourself. But negative side of peer pressure is also the fact that it can lead you to do wrong things that you shouldn't do. And so if you want to talk about peer pressure, it's just unfortunate that most times we talk about it from the angle of you yielding to negative things. But peer pressure has helped people to actually go ahead to be the very best version of themselves, pushing them beyond limits to actually be the best at what they do, or even take steps that they naturally wouldn't have taken.
The advantage of, let's say, peer pressure on the youth maybe would be like, let's say, in terms of, let's say, like sports, where people work together, right? I think that would be a positive side of peer pressure, because people tend to work in groups, because sports is all about teamwork, and that might create a positivity in terms of peer pressure and as regards to the youth. But then if we go to the other side, which is the negative side of peer pressure, is that people tend to learn behavior in groups, right? And being in groups, it might lead to someone probably learning certain traits that might be negative in their life. For example, if people are into drinking alcohol in the group, then they drink. There are some people that are known as social drinkers, or learning some traits like smoking and all that. So that's the negative side of things. But the positive side is, when you're in sports, teamwork works out, right?
Peer pressure is the influence of your peers on your behavior or on all that you do or the way you act. Okay, so we have peer pressure could be either positive and it could be either negative. Why? It depends on the circle that a particular person moves with. And everybody wants to be loved, everybody wants to be accepted by their own society or by their own circle. So we tend to move in the direction of our peers. So how can we solve this particular issue? How can we make sure that everybody has positive peer pressure? The only way to solve this is to make sure that our youths are in their best circle.
Well, those were the opinions of the youth across Africa regarding the topic peer pressure and what they had to say. I still have my guests with me, Esther and Nancy. And before we checked out the Vox Pop, Nancy mentioned that there is such a thing as good peer pressure, that positive peer pressure and the negative peer pressure. We're still going to come to that. But Esther, I would like to ask you, what would you say is the level of intensity that peer pressure has in this recent age and time? I mean, before now, I don't think, of course there was a thing as peer pressure, but I don't think it was as rampant as it is now. So what level of intensity would you say peer pressure has in this recent time?
Thank you for that question. So I think that in the 21st century, the times that we are in, there is so much pressure, like there is so much focus on the pressure than the peer. And both should definitely work together, but that's not what we're seeing happening now, especially in the behavioral patterns of the youth nowadays. You see that, almost everyone is doing the same thing. We're saying the same thing. We're sounding alike. We are almost similar in a way, in a good way, but also in a bad way. And I think that the intensity of peer pressure is high, probably because of social media. Yes, social media has its benefits, but also we can't neglect the negative aspects of social media, because we're all sort of interconnected. Then there is that pressure to fit in. There is that pressure to balance it out and just be amongst every other person and not just be different in our own way. We should endeavor to embrace our difference, but that's not what the 21st century peer pressure is saying.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Esther. And Nancy, the million-dollar question: what is the difference between positive peer pressure and negative peer pressure?
Positive peer pressure influences you to apply yourself. It influences you to be the best version of yourself and evolve in that direction. The negative peer pressure makes you believe that you have to change you have to become someone else to be the best version of you. It doesn't make you believe that you have all it takes already within you, and maybe with a few knowledge here and there, to be the best version of you. And why this is very poisonous is when it happens to young people, they carry that burden of low self-esteem and lack of identity all through their journeys in life. So you have people who get broken because of negative peer pressure. They grow from being kids who are broken. They become broken adults. They get married. They give us a broken home. They give us a broken society. So it is very, very important that we begin to pay attention to patterns that make young people question their sanity. Initially, we had Blackberries, right? There was the rave. Everybody wanted a Blackberry. Then from there, I think we moved to the flip Samsung phone. And we moved to the iPhones, the tiny ones, and now we have the touch screens. And at some point for the girls, it was the bone straight. And then we moved to the era of BTC. Everybody's a Texas. You're not a Texas, you're not in there. And we have people who would have been fantastic medical doctors going to become, I'm not saying, I don't have anything about against tech. I'm a Texas myself, right? But I see people who are smart, intelligent, they discuss physics, they eat chemistry for breakfast. And I look at these kids struggling to understand data analysis because their friends are smarter. This is just the most basic example I can think of right now. And what do you expect is going to happen when that person gets into a university system, is done with a university system, gets into the workplace? So the person is always going to have the mindset of a healthy competition. So even when other people are thriving in their zone of genius, this other person is struggling because he or she believes that I need to compete to show myself. And that's the great disaster of negative peer pressure. So the difference, very clear.
Okay, thank you for that clarity, Nancy. Now, to have more context, I would also like to ask Esther. We talked about the level of intensity that peer pressure has had in recent time. Do you think that social media has played any role in it? Now, some people will say that social media has magnified peer pressure in many ways than one. Would you say that it's true that social media has been the major influence of peer pressure in recent time?
I don't want to give a general yes, but I would hide under the umbrella of yes. So the social media allows us to sort of see every other person's lives, even if that is not the actual life in the real sense of it, but the life we see on social media is what we believe to be the single and the only true life of that one person. Now, I, as a person, I see that person's life. I'm like, oh, I want that kind of life. You know, I don't see the work the person is doing behind the scene, but all I see is that thing on social media. And I'm like, that is the life I want, right? So it could give me a sort of pressure that makes me do what I am not supposed to do just because I want to portray myself as that person on social media, right? Another perspective would be that you see someone doing something, your peer doing something, you're not friends with the person, but you see the person on social media doing great, you could draw inspiration from the person to do something great for yourself, right? So peer pressure is not even about people in your circle alone. It could be about people you see on the internet. So yes, in a way, social media affects peer pressure, and in other ways, maybe not.
But again, there is an argument, Esther, that sometimes peer pressure, especially on social media, doesn't exactly make people want to do better for themselves. It has a perverse way of making someone want to be exactly like another person. Let's say, for example, someone who is a profound actor keeps posting their progress on social media, and someone who can, I wouldn't say cannot make it in the acting world, but someone who is, more proficient in, let's say, the art world as an artist or something else, now wants to become an actor to be as successful and as famous as the actor. Do you see how perverse that can be? I mean, some people will say that people get distracted from their own goals to run another person's race because they see that it looks greener on that side. It looks more appealing to be an actor. And so some people will drop their own first love, their own passion, to just follow something that looks as though it would make them more successful or hastening up the process.
Yeah, I think that happens to the very best of us. It happens to all of us. We get influenced by the things we see. But that is where our self-identity comes in. We need to be grounded in the idea of who we are and how we perceive ourselves enough to be able to interpret what we see on social media, what we see our peers doing in the best way possible for our best interest. So this is what I'm saying. If I see you doing, you're a fantastic host, you know how to do it. I wish I could do what you're doing. I can only wish. But I'm not going to go out of my way to start doing what you're doing because it is not my path. It is not what I am good at. And I don't want to bother myself to do it because I have an identity of who I am and I understand the perception of myself. So I think that it's not social media that is making people misinterpret what they see on there, but it is the person themselves. How well are they grounded in who they are?
Okay, thank you for that, Esther. Now let's talk about gender comparison, Nancy. Can we say that there is more pressure on one gender than the other when it comes to peer pressure? For example, on social media, you see a lot of guys riding cars, and some people can almost always tell what they do to get that. But then again, some other people are putting in genuine work, to be that successful. But then you see another innocent guy who wants to be as successful as that, but doesn't know how to go about it. And then sometimes he just feels like he's a failure because everybody he sees on social media is either riding a Benz or having houses in Banana Island or just doing something far greater than he thinks he can achieve. And then on the other part, there is the ladies who, I mean, that even happens on a daily basis. You see people with bone straight hairs, people who, I wouldn't say they don't work, but somehow you feel like you're working harder than these ladies, but you see that they're living life better than, or seemingly living life better than you are. So would we say that the pressure is more on one gender than it is on the other?
That the way you framed that question was so interesting. I was smiling all through. So the beautiful thing about this is young people see other young people do these things in quotes, and they kind of believe that the only version they show online is all there is to it, right? I think it's not, the gender problem is not even a personal thing because every gender has problems that they face. The women will say, oh, our own challenges are more. When the men who hardly will talk about theirs, women, we talk about ours more often. You see platforms for women to talk about diverse issues, men, just a few here and there. So we really don't know all the problems they are facing. So every gender has theirs. But so many people are on the fast lane on the road to the wrong destination. That's one. Secondly, a lot of young people have not discovered their zone of genius. So they are busy copying people who are operating in their zone of genius. So when you understand that this is my core, this is my strength, and you maximize it, you learn all there is about it. And I meet Esther, and she's good with languages. It's easy for us to collaborate than compete. It's easy for Esther to say, how can I and Nancy bet something amazing? I can speak 7 languages. Nancy can help me strategize on how to put this out there as content that is appealing to anyone who is interested in languages. So young people, both male and female, we need to start thinking about collaboration instead of competition, because a lot of people are on the fast lane to the wrong destination.
I like how you frame that, collaboration instead of competition. Well, please hold that thought. My guest is still with me, but it's time for us to go on a quick break now. And when we come back, we'll still be taking reactions from social media on this very important discourse. And of course, we'll still delve more into the conversation. Don't go anywhere, to stay with us. Well, thank you for staying with us on Fafanua Africa. Now, we have been talking about the power and presence of peer pressure, which can be seen in almost every aspect of adolescent life. Talk about the choice of dressing, music, language, involvement in school, community activities, and involvement with family as well. Now, peer influence is a way of intentionally or unintentionally transmitting a group's attitude so that a person is encouraged to be consistent with the norms of that group. In order to fit in and be accepted, adolescents or youths often succumb to this influence. And this influence is of particular importance in early as opposed to late youths and, everybody basically. When it comes time to be easily swayed, you see a lot of people who are susceptible to peer pressure or peer influence due to the development of the reward mechanisms in the brain that precedes control mechanisms. Anyways, that said, we have our guests with us. We still have our guests from the first half of the show. And we also have joining us, I mentioned his name earlier and he's here now, a business consultant and political strategist from Nigeria, Nwali Desmond. Thank you, Desmond, for being with us.
Thank you, Blessing.
It's a pleasure. All right. Also in the United Kingdom, we still have Esther Airemionkhale. Esther, I'm so sorry. I'm doing my best.
Airemionkhale.
Airemionkhale.
Now that's how to pronounce it.
Okay, Airemionkhale. Okay, I knew that. Thank you, Esther, for still being with us. And of course, we have Esther is an educationist, by the way, in the United Kingdom. And of course, we have Nwosu, content strategist in Nigeria. Thank you, Nancy, for still being here.
You're all welcome.
All right. So before we went on the very short break, we're talking about the gender difference and whether or not there is, more pressure on one gender or it's just equal pressure across board. And Nancy made a very salient point and said it's time for us to collaborate more instead of compete more. But I would still like for us to talk about the gender differences when it comes to peer pressure, because, of course, we have a different gender in the house now, so it's only fair that we hear his point. So I would like Desmond to have the floor when to give his opinions on gender difference when it comes to peer pressure. Desmond?
Okay, so I believe that each gender faces what we call a level of peer pressure. However, it just depends on the voice that is more amplified. That's what we get to see, right? So for girls, for example, or the female gender, what we get to see is, quote me anywhere, I believe 5 out of every 10 girls out there might be into runs. I'm sorry to say, in Lagos, 5 out of 10. But they don't go out there, or they don't come out to say these things because it is not something that people easily talk about. For guys, we don't come out to say these things a lot. The kind of pressure we face, we don't come. For somebody like me that is young, trying to find my way in the political space and in the business space, I am exposed to a lot of things, a lot of shortcuts for me to take. But I am not built to come outside, or it's not acceptable for me to come outside and say these things because people will see me as weak, right? But when it comes to expressing what they call it, the kind of pressure that we face, the only outlet is social media. And when we do that because we are given a perception of what is not real. So what that means basically is we go on social media and we see a perception of people's reality and thinking that's the reality, but it is not the reality. It's just a perception of what they are trying to make you believe. But what we face at night, what we face when we want to go to bed, the kind of skeletons in people's cupboard, especially in Lagos, in Nigeria, will be alarming if people really start talking about these things. So what I believe basically is how much voice is amplified depending on the gender. So currently, what I was talking to somebody before I came on air, and I was telling the person, see, we need to start creating an environment that is acceptable for people to really express how they feel. Do you understand? If we can create such environments, such groups, it is easier for people to actually air out their views or what they are facing. This way, we'll be able to help them. Otherwise, we'll just keep creating perceptions, and people will be taking that as though it's reality and is wrong and is killing our society. That's my view concerning it.
Okay, thank you so much, Desmond, for airing your view. I mean, it was necessary that we had that side of it aired. Also, I would like us to talk about the culprits when it comes to peer pressure. Esther, now, who do we say are the major culprits when we talk about peer pressure? Is it the friends who silently throw some, subtle jabs at you for not being as hardworking, not being as successful? Or is it the bosses in different offices who throw jabs at you for not being as, resilient or hardworking as the others? Or is it the parents who always talk about when you're going to marry or when you're going to give them grandchildren, or people on social media? Who exactly are the major culprits when we talk about peer pressure?
So that's a very interesting question, a very difficult one. I think that the construction of peer pressure itself is highly paradoxical, because the culprits are the victims are the culprits. It's that easy. For example, my mother raised me the best way she knew how to, based on what they were doing during their own time. I'll probably raise my children based on what they're doing during my time. So we can't separate ourselves from our society, from our environment, from our context. And being that we are still in that context, we are culprits and victims of peer pressure.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Esther. Nancy, do you want to throw in something about that?
Oh my God. So who exactly is the victim? Here, the victim and the people who are supposed to be putting them under pressure are intertwined. They're in a relationship that cannot be separated, because all of them exist in the same ecosystem with the same challenges, with the same realities. So you cannot really take them apart. But I would say, as a content strategist, that the kind of things your children consume when they are young is very important, because it goes a long way to frame their mindsets, their thought patterns, and their value systems. So parents have a lot of work to do before the children get to the age of mental independence. So I think here the parents will take a higher percentage of care, because once this child's value system is formed, every other thing is just layering. The foundation is done, and there is nothing that we can do to undo it. So parents, please, parents, guardians, teachers that teach nursery, primary, and secondary schools, you need to pay serious attention, because everything that exists online is a part of someone's reality that they want to show. Nobody comes online to show the bad, that they're struggling. Everybody wants to look really great and all doing it. You need to let the children know that there is a reality that exists outside of social media, especially as they grow into the age of social media. Because right now we have children with tabs. We say, oh, they have to learn on their tablets. Their learnings are on the tablets. Everything is happening online. So you need to start teaching them media literacy from a very young age.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Now, Desmond, earlier you were talking about the impact that people do not see or hear, especially when it comes to what people are experiencing from peer pressure. And you used Lagos State as an example. What effects do you think that this will have on a person's mental health if these issues are not addressed? You said it's time for us to start giving people the opportunity to express what they feel and how they really feel pressured by their peers, especially online or wherever it is. So what effects do you think it will have at the end of the day if these issues are not addressed?
Okay, so I think we are on a fast race towards doom if this is not addressed. And why I think so is because what we are facing right now is a pandemic, and people are not saying anything about it. People are not really talking about it. I will explain. So the effect that is going to have on the long run is that we're going to have broken adults who would marry broken people, and they will build broken homes. I think it was Nancy that was talking about parents having a greater percentage of of the share when it comes to being victims or corporates, right? I believe also that if we continue this way, we're going to have parents, we're going to have children or babies who become parents, and babies being fathers and mothers to fellow babies. That way, they are unable to protect their children. The primary duty of every parent is basically to provide and to protect, right? And if they cannot protect their children from the harmful and toxic environments that we have right now, especially in the media space, it's going to continue like that. And they are going to raise broken children. Those broken children will become, they'll be fed back into the society, and it will become a broken society all the way. So what I believe basically is that if we do not start creating, like deliberately creating spaces and solutions to these things, we're going to have a very, very disastrous future, even in Nigeria.
All right, thank you for that, Desmond. Well, I still have my guests with me, but right now it's time for us to take a look at some social media reactions to this very important topic. And of course, we'll go to Twitter to see what the tweets are saying. Now, Former Thought says, peer pressure is real and it can be positive or negative.
Yeah.
You become the people you're surrounded by. And trust me, that's the thing. Now, Musumola says, most people know what is right, but they choose to do the wrong things and support rubbish, mostly because of peer pressure. And we see that most times in people's comments and tweets, especially when it comes to maybe celebrities or things going on in the country. They want to belong and they try to stay relevant by all means. Wokeness is unnecessary. People can't even be their true self because of the fear of rejection. That's profound, honestly. In this age and time, being woke is what is trending. Now, Katarina says, we live in a world where people shame you, call you boring for eating your meal prepped food. Hard to stay healthy these days. Honestly, sometimes I almost give in on the peer pressure. Stressful. Now, Ipsa says, when will people understand that peer pressure is such a wasteful thing of society? According to her elder sister, so she says. Now, Saad Abdullah says, people who take a decision and stand by it don't give in to peer pressure and are always ready to face loss are the people who have my utmost respect. These are not acquired traits. You're born with them. Blessed people. I mean, as easy as it sounds, it's quite hard to do too, especially when you have your opinions and you have thousands of people opposing it, especially now that we see that people are very, keypad savvy. Because you can't see their faces, they just want to type whatever and think they can go away with it. But anyways, Anwar says, peer pressure is a label to justify weak-minded people, excluding the immature children, of course. Eternity Planner says, the evil of the internet and social media has led to so much peer pressure. People have resorted to defiancy to try and stand out. They are lost within themselves, trying to find meaning for their existence. Never compare yourself to anyone else. I assure you, God doesn't. I mean, these are really profound words, and it almost sounds motivating. But really, if we look at what's happening around our society now, we see that, like they say, it's almost impossible for you to want to hold your own opinions because you feel like you want to stand in. Standing out just all of a sudden no longer makes sense. And that is a very, very devastating thing in this age and time where you just want to blend, because if you stand out, you're scared that they will come for you. So you rather just follow the bandwagon and come for others so that they don't come for you. And it really is a very scary phenomenon, if you ask me. But let's also talk about, I mean, I still have my guests with me. I have Esther with me, I have Nancy, and of course I have Desmond. They've been doing fantastic. I mean, they've been doing justice to my questions. Esther, I would like to ask, how do you think that we can curb this inevitable menace? I call it inevitable because the truth is we can't do without peer pressure. It will continue to exist, especially now with the introduction of social media. It will even get worse, let's face the truth. But how do we curb this?
Instead of using the word curb, I would say, how do we choose our pressure? Like you said, it's not going anywhere. We need peer pressure, right? Because we need people to influence us to make our decisions, and that's just the truth. It's a bitter truth, but it is the truth. So Desmond said something before about re-educating ourselves, and from an education standpoint of view, I think that we need to an extent in maybe integrate media literacy or digital literacy into our curriculum, because then we're able to understand that social media is just social media. It's not real life. It is not my entire life. It is a fragment that stands on its own, so that you can treat it like that. Because here in the UK, I know that we have digital literacy in the curriculum and it's taught in schools, but I'm not sure we have that in Nigeria. I think for our sake and for the generation's sake and for sustainability's sake, because I always think
Nancy says we don't.
We don't.
we don't.
Okay.
I think Nancy should start advocating for that.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, for sustainability's sake, right? So that babies will not birth babies and raise babies by babies. We need that curriculum to have digital literacy, media literacy. And how do you face the internet? How do you receive information from the internet? How do you process information from the internet? I just think that we need to integrate it into our curriculum.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Esther. Now, we know for a fact that we can talk about peer pressure, especially from the aspect of social media, without mentioning online bullying and harassment. So that brings me to the question, Nancy, do you think that at this point it is expedient for online bullying and harassment to be criminalized? Because if it's not curbed, maybe that is like one of the best ways to curb it or at least tame it, because if it's not, people will think that they can say or do whatever they want to say on social media, and hence they will influence other people's decision, and before you know, we're birthing a generation of rebels on social media. So do you think that at this point it should be criminalized? I know it's been a long time conversation and argument, but at this point, what do you think it should be?
A society without the rule of law will soon be thrown into deep anarchy. That's that's life. That's reality, right? So how do we bring rule of law online when it comes to cyberbullying? I would say that first we need to train people on what cyberbullying is, how to identify it. Because in Nigeria, I promise you that if you just make some set of rules and say anybody who bullies you online should be jailed, some people are going to take advantage of some people. Everything is now an opportunity to send someone to jail, whether for something they said or did not say, something they did or did not do. So first, let's start with the education. So when we're able to properly educate people, it's just like the way we have the people on the road safety officers. They go through a series of trainings to be able to identify issues in your car that make it not be roadworthy. The same way we need to go back and train individuals, groups, to understand what cyberbullying is. They need to understand digital literacy, media literacy, why it's important that as a nation, the way we are portrayed matters. And then we can now implement rules that when individuals or group breaks, we can jail them for doing so. Until we're able to put the training, the curriculum, the right training materials, the right channels, we cannot just bring some rules from anywhere and slap it on someone. How are you sure that the person who you are putting in charge of that, or to safeguard that rule you just made, is not breaking it or even enabling people to break it? So let us start with education before we start thinking of consequences of these actions. Are they happening in Nigeria? Yes, they are happening. Can we do something about it? Yes, we can do something about it. But let us understand what we are dealing with, the grassroots of the problems first, before we jump right into the consequences.
All right, real profound words. Thank you so much, Nancy. And my final question goes to Desmond. If you were to prefer solutions, intervention measures, what will they be? I mean, from the aspect of the government, the society, the family, and the youths themselves, what would your intervention measures be?
I think it still boils down to what the both other guests said. I think it boils down to education. Without education, you are just making laws for nothing. I will give you a short statistic. I think from 2015 up to now, we have an increase of more than 77% of BBL. That's Brazilian butt lifts, right? And it's shocking to discover that some of the people who pioneered this are actually changing their ways. so to say. I would not mention a particular American celebrity who recently gave her life to Christ, stopped doing what she was doing, but the people that she has influenced over time had gone through that direction, right? I will not use the word influence, I'll use the word educate, right? Because education can be negative or positive, right? So the people that and some people died in the process of doing BBL. Now, so what am I saying in essence? I'm saying we need to then go back to what's our educationist said earlier enough, which is we need to start infusing digital literacy into our curriculum. We need to start, educating our parents on how to proper parenting when it comes to the 21st century, because we're still using old manual to train our children or our kids these days. So we need to re-educate our parents on how to educate their parents, right? We need to educate the teachers on the measures and the things that they need to put in place, because we cannot take technology or the internet away from this life, right? So we need to teach them how to teach our children this way, and we need to start as the strategist, content strategist mentioned, Nancy. Yes, we need to start holding people accountable, but before we hold them accountable, we need to train them over time. So one of the problems, I'm sorry, Blessing, I need to say this. One of the problems that we have in Nigeria is that we like quick fix. We want to, okay, this is the solution. No, it's not the solution. We need to take time. We need to like in proper educated or advanced clients. What we do is that they have like a 10-year plan. How do we cop this? We have like a 20-year plan. But in Nigeria, we just want to, okay, just do this. It's not bubonishe. Do you understand? That is just sharp, everything. No,
plug and play.
You take time to solution is progressive. Do you understand? So that's what I believe we should do. Education is the key.
Fantastic. I mean, I do not want this session to end because it's really been an interesting one. And I hope that we can have this conversation. Maybe we'll need a part 2 of this conversation. What do you guys say?
Of course.
All right. But I just want to take this time to say thank you to all my guests. You all have done fantastically well. Business consultant and political strategist from Nigeria, Nwali Desmond. Thank you for joining us. I mean, you joined and then you took it over.
It's fine.
Thank you so much. Also in the United Kingdom, Esther, Airemionkhale. Thank you so much for joining us. She's an educationist in the United Kingdom. Thank you for giving us your opinions on this matter.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And also we have Nancy Nwosu, content strategist in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Nancy, for joining us.
Thank you for having me today.
A pleasure.